Hi, I'm Greg Schaefer, and welcome to the virtual CISO moment. We've got a special guest today, Craig Sandman. He's been in information security for some time, and very good to have you. Thank you for joining us, Craig. I'd like to hear a little bit about your past and your affiliation with information security, and anything else you'd like to talk about.
That's great, Greg. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. Yeah, so just to introduce myself, Craig Sandman, I'm the president and co-founder of a company called Symbol Security. We are security awareness training providers, typically distributing through third-party partners, virtual CISOs like yourself, and managed security service providers, really focused on our deliverable through them. The company's 4 years old. I've been at this for the entirety of those 4 years. Prior to that, just to kind of give you a sense of how I got here, I really had two career runs, from my 20s up to this point now. One was at AT&T. I spent a lot of time there managing large clients and a bit on the internal operations side as well. And from there, I went to a cloud provider called Navisite, where I led their third-party sales organization, really learned and developed, the practice of distribution of services through technology partners, and made a lot of great relationships in the technology industry, service providers and managed service providers, and large alliances like HP and EMC and IBM and Cisco, helping them write what was their service provider cloud programs at the time. So I really cut my teeth in third-party distribution in that role. Eventually, we were acquired by Time Warner Cable and then Charter. And as I think happens to some of us, I had an itch to scratch on starting a business, and met my co-founder, and I kind of came to a business plan in and around that 2018 timeframe, which set the stage for what I'm at today. But so that's how I got here. And it's been a great run. I love talking to people like you. I love working in this space and working with great partners. So yeah, that's my background and how I got here. And I guess I'll hit the personal side too. So 3 kids, 2 teenage daughters, and a 10-year-old boy, and running around chasing them, doing whatever my wife tells me, and trying to stay out of trouble. It's basically the personal side of my world.
Oh, very good. Thank you for all that. And I know we've talked before about how we both have a passion for information security and small businesses, and in some ways almost like a little bit of a calling in a way. And but information security, no matter what, how you approach it, from what angle, whether it be from the practitioner side or the service provider side or other sides, it can be rather stressful as well as being rewarding. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about your motivation as to why you're so passionate about the information security in the small and mid-sized business space, and with the security awareness in particular.
Yeah, really great question. I love efficiency and innovation, and solving problems, and I think you'd agree that there's a lot of that needed in the SMB space. So it's super rewarding when you can build something based off of problems that you see in the industry, and you can watch that the problem solving starting to happen, and watch the improvements starting to happen. So my co-founder Antonio is an amazing mind from a automation and development perspective, and I've been really trained to listen, to understand problems that third-party managed service providers and virtual CISOs are having, and solving this massive issue with SMBs, and and their struggle to stay compliant and keep themselves secure. And it's a lot of fun, kind of waking up every day and tackling those issues. And on the sort of on like the the personal side of things, in terms of, beyond the business side, what do we try to accomplish when we, get up and go to work every day? I believe the SMB space is in real trouble when it comes to cybersecurity, particularly. And it's too bad because there's so many great companies attempting to do great things, and they have to deal with this issue of cybersecurity. I don't believe our government and our regulators are going to move fast enough and with the right answers to actually prevent the launch pads of cybercrime from happening. So we seem to be seeing a lot of regulations and, a lot of well-intentioned legislature that's going to come down, but it's going to push more work on these small businesses. And so who's going to help them? If you're a $10 million, $25 million company, you're trying to grow, you're trying to do a good thing and bring a great service or product into the world. Now you have to deal with a lot of administration and technology to keep yourself secure while you do that. That to me is a great challenge to sink your teeth into. And for people like you and for people like me, keeps me going. And there's a lot there. It's not going to be easy. Certainly little pieces of of the solution that you can bring and improve on each day and each year, but it's a massive problem. And so it keeps me totally entertained, totally energized, and it's one that I want to be able to help solve.
Well, I know you mentioned about regulations and standards and those sorts of things. And at some point in time, sometimes I feel like it seems like that the only response that government has to fixing this problem of information security vulnerabilities and issues is to issue another standard or another regulation. But what we find sometimes from the virtual CISO space is that the businesses understand now that they're beholden to something, but they don't really know what that means. And I think that part of that also comes down to sometimes you talk about information security awareness on just from a threat level, but also from just what do you have to comply with, and more importantly, why do you have to comply with it? When they say like you must have two-factor authentication, for example, well, why is that? And so a lot of times I at this point in time I usually will ask something along the lines of, what do you feel is the a very major issue with small and mid-sized businesses and information security? You've kind of touched on that a little bit, but I want to dig a little bit more into the awareness side. That's been kind of a difficult egg to crack in some ways with small and mid-sized businesses, because you get to the point where you start layering all sorts of security training and other training on top of what all the other stuff they want to do, they have to do. And all that they want to do with security training is just click through it and say, okay, I'm done and I'm good for the next year. You're really not accomplishing anything there. But how do you view that, and how do you feel is a better approach to really making information security awareness more effective?
Yeah, it's funny, when we started the company, we knew we were a piece of the puzzle, and we knew we weren't the entirety of the problem that needed to be solved. And it's cultural. So the world's changed since people like you and I came into our professional careers, and what we were taught in order to get there wasn't really cybersecurity or cyber safety. And the truth now is you have to be aware of that, just like you would be with physical safety situations, not putting yourself in harm's way in a number of different ways, like when you're brought up as a kid and your parents teach you things or trying to protect you, right? And how often does cyber safety come into the conversation, and your parents say, son, I need to sit you down, I want to tell you about, they're not talking about cyber safety. And you work your way through school, and it's starting to creep in there now. But for those of us that we didn't have that educational track when we were younger, it's not natural. And I think a lot of the workforce is just not a natural thing. And so the challenge number one is cultural awareness, and just kind of generally taking it from a checkbox and something I have to do because, you know, corporate's telling me to do it, to, hey, this is really important stuff for my life. And for companies to project that, hey, this is really important for the company. And when, let's face it, when executives, when they state the importance of something, you know, at the company level, and they dig into it and it becomes part of the cultural fabric, it gets done. That's why great companies become great, because, you know, leadership has pushed down, and pushed down is probably the wrong word, but they've made part of the fabric of the company these things that are important. And cybersecurity and awareness and those types of things is not really there. There's other cultural things that are, like, you know, being good to each other, diversity, you know, recognition of things that are a part of the fabric of the culture. Like, you know, executive teams push that through organizations, and enable organizations and bring in the type of people that fit that, you know, profile for them. Where's cybersecurity awareness in that? You know, it's not really a part of the equation. So one of the things that we look at is really taking that concept of people risk and education and making it super visible with data. That's kind of where it starts. You know, it's just identifying the weak points isn't the entirety of the answer. You have to kind of educate, and you have to build your culture. And a lot of those things don't exist in software like we build, you know, has to be beyond that. And people like you and others that consult with executive teams and bring that education in and bring that mindset in and maybe help, you know, turn the culture a little bit are super important. So yeah, there's a big problem. It's not going to get solved overnight. And the other side of this issue too is, so you have culture and awareness. We could train people to be, you know, all like, make everybody as cyber detectives and bring them up to a level 10 out of 10 in terms of their awareness. On the other side, we still have what's a complete turkey shoot for cyber criminals. I mean, it's relatively easy to be a cyber criminal, right? You have access to all the tools you need. You're not really stopped in any way from acquiring any of the weaponry of cyber attacks, right? Nothing really out there to stop people. You have a credit card, you have some financial means, you pretty much get at it, whatever you need. So, you know, on that side of the battle, they're well stocked. On the defense side, we've got companies and people that want to live life and be productive in a certain way with certain freedoms, and that opens up the doors. So we really have to, if we want to maintain that level of, you know, freedom and productivity and things like that, we really have to be hyper educated and aware so that we can recognize things, so that we can keep ourselves and our companies, you know, free from threats and things like that.
I think you touched upon something that is a lot of things were vitally important there. So I didn't want to limit it just to one, but in particular, you were talking about culture and from the top down or from the executive level. And that's something that I hear a lot from other, not only virtual CISOs, but other practitioners in the space. And it seems like that sometimes that those organizations that are having more information and cybersecurity issues, at least trying to get a program running, are doing so without as much executive management support. And conversely, what I've seen and what some of my colleagues have seen as well is that sometimes small businesses, their first sort of prompt into building an information security program more from a compliance standpoint, and that's more often than not driven from a business requirement standpoint. So one example would be a small or mid-sized business is being asked more and more by their clients and prospects to prove their information security posture via typically like a SOC 2 audit. And so now you have the need to do an audit. And of course, we say in information security that compliance doesn't equal security. But in some cases, that seems to be a launch point for building security programs and maybe even for turning around some culture. And I'm wondering if you've seen anything similar to that, where starting with external forces from a business standpoint, a business need, has actually been able to prompt the organization to build within then as a response an information security culture.
Yeah, the compliance requirements, they do trigger, ideally they trigger behavioral changes and not, oh my gosh, I've gotten through the audit, great. I'll see that thing again next year. You know what I mean? It's like everything that, happens on a once a year basis, like tax season or any of those things. Like if, you take this back to your individual life, you don't do anything to organize yourself throughout the year. And then come tax season, you got to get everything together. It's painful.
Yeah, I'm there right now.
Right. But if you're systematically operating in a way where, as expenses come in, they're getting categorized and all those other things, well, then, the audit or the tax event, like those become just accumulation of things you've already been doing.
It's still an issue, a mountain to climb, if you will. But I totally understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
So long as you've been actually working towards it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And that's why when it's a part, when things like cybersecurity awareness or cyber safety are part of your culture, and not an assignment, it's something you're doing already anyways. It's kind of wired into product development. It's wired into process and, and employee behavior and things like that. So, the audit and compliance, sometimes it drives a company to make that behavioral change. And if, of the greatest companies are already there, and so they get the compliance audit and it's like, oh, that was easy, we're doing all these things anyways. Most people aren't there, but yeah, I think that's, the compliance is good in the sense that, it creates it creates standards which help give consistency across, industries and things like that. But it also creates, almost a playbook of things you can flip around and say, hey, I need to embed these concepts into culture and into our deliverables. And that's where the training and awareness for companies like us comes into play. What are we training employees on? And we actually have supplemental trainings on compliance too. So, just to tell the difference between, hey, I passed an audit, to what do my employees need to do, or spinning it around in a slightly negative way, what might they do that might screw up my compliance, and educating the employees so that, like, for instance, CMMC created a huge buzz, and there's all this, management of controlled unclassified information that is pushed down to individuals, right? They have to manage controlled unclassified information in a certain way in order for an organization to, uphold their CMMC compliance. So who's educating them on that, right? It's that education won't dictate the passing of the audit, but if they fail in execution and there's evidence of failure there, they might fail the audit. So there's a lot of, compliance translates into, good cultural improvements from a cyber safety perspective that can happen, and they're driven by these regulations.
So in any industry where there's that passion to do what you do, and certainly this is the case here in information security, you have to step away from it every now and then. And so I think it's very important, particularly for security practitioners, to not get sucked in 24/7, to have a more balanced life existence and have different hobbies, different things that sometimes I use the word decompress. What's something that you do to sort of step away from all the stress in information security?
Yeah, I totally agree. For me, it's usually like some kind of exercise or, physical activity. Because you get a lot coming at you. And I don't think this is limited to IT. I think this is just work in general. So if I'm properly executing my personal life, I'll get out for a run, I'll play basketball, I'll do something, go to the gym, on maybe not every day, but a few times a week. And that really, it helps me clear my head. there's something about like the endorphins that kick off when, you get a little sweat going, and, and that to me helps really clear my head too, especially if I've built up a lot of, stress from a day. But I think I mentioned this fun. I enjoy what I do. And so for that reason, like, this is, I'm not, I don't mind the work, and I actually enjoy the work, but there's sort of that balance, because I think a lot of IT work and a lot of the work we do is sedentary, right? We're sitting in front of computers. And so there's just for me, like a physical balance there, maybe more so than the mental balance. I think about this stuff all the time. And I'm okay with it. That's really okay with me. I don't need to jump into a book. I know some people like to do that just to mentally escape to other places. I'll do that a little bit with TV and with sports and stuff like that. And I mentioned the family, so they certainly provide a nice alternative place to direct my energy to. But yeah, I think for me, working out is a great way to to just kind of like get your mind in a different place, or physically give you a sense of accomplishment when you've been sitting at a desk or in a car all day.
Yeah, I can certainly relate with that, especially this time of year. Yesterday, down here in Tennessee, in Franklin, it was about 77 in the afternoon. And instead of doing a gym
Nice.
row workout, I just decided, you know what, I'm going to go out and jog 3 or 4 miles, get some vitamin D, decompress from the day. It's like it's perfect. So I could do a whole nother podcast on just
well, and Greg,
working
people
out.
people can go for that run and listen to your podcast.
Yeah, it's short enough if you're fast enough. So, well, listen, I really appreciate it. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on while we're here today?
I'd love to see. I love what you're doing, by the way, and I think the vCISO model and the importance of it is tremendous. I don't believe that we'll reach a space where we have enough well-rounded executives that a true CEO or chief marketing officer, other executive in an organization can actually wear the CISO hat effectively. I think the army of executive specialists is necessary, and we need to grow that because the SMB space is underserved. And quite frankly, the only way they can afford the expertise is to do it in a fractional basis. And I think you would probably agree with me that when you do what you do, for an SMB, and you get expertise across multiple clients, you can go in and implement with efficiency, across these entities and bring value to them. And I'm a huge believer in the model. So, as you know, I have a project with Laura Dana Nikolai, who's the CEO of our marketing organization. She's been a great partner of mine, and we've built vCISO News, which is a digital magazine aimed at promoting and really getting the word out on vCISOs and the goodness that they bring. So she and I and others are huge advocates of the virtual CISO model, and not only for the benefit to the organizations themselves, but as the president of a security awareness training software company, I know that vCISOs are incredible implementers of our platform, meaning, without them, or without someone that's really the sponsor and the owner of the platform, no matter how good we build software, it's not going to change culture. It's not going to work the way it should unless you have a proper implementation, and that's something that's driven by somebody. So yeah, I figured I'd give a plug for just the importance of the vCISO as we move forward, particularly for the SMB space.
So website, vcisonews.com. Is that
this website, vcisonews.com?
And then symbol?
And symbol is symbolsecurity.com. Okay. So you can reach me through either of those channels, and you can also find me on LinkedIn at Craig Sandman, you'll find me. So happy to take any questions or help in any way. And I love to network. So welcome any suggestions or any invitations to connect.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Craig, so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it. And for everybody else, stay secure.